from the audience about the material covered in the previous presentation, Understanding My Will. Recorded on the 26th of February 2016 in Noosaville, Queensland, Australia.
For all the other presentations that we've had before the first one, I've been excited. I've been hanging on every single word. I've been like, yes, it's an answer to my prayer. But
most of you are pretty confronted with this one.
But this one, it's like, yeah, it was a struggle to stay awake. I mean, I obviously did stay awake, and I drank a lot of water and all that. So, is it my will to not listen or not? Because I'm here, I was like, I want to, but am I using willpower to...
Why don't you want to hear about these things? Let's look at that issue, because a lot of you are in this boat. So why don't you want to hear about these things? Tell me. If we come across to Laura, and then on this side to Di.
Because if we hear it, we'll have to take action, or it will also require us to look at sincerely at those four things, basically to avoid our pain.
So require action, but what's the underlying issue with requiring action? Like, what's the problem there? If we come to Linda.
It's about avoiding personal responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah, avoiding personal responsibility. Let's just write that down. The reason why you want the world's definition of love and the world's definition of how to use your will, responsibility, is because you don't want to take personal responsibility for the exercise of your will. And you know, the whole world thinks this way. We see it all the time. All the time. The whole things like unemployment, where did that come from? Unemployment benefits. From the world not wanting to take responsibility for its will. It comes from this feeling in the end that external forces control my life, and I should not be expected to take action and change my life when external forces have influenced the outcome of my life. Right? So it comes from this issue of not wanting to take responsibility. And there's so many things in this world that are like that. So many things where people don't want to take responsibility. Like, you go out and you jump up and down on a mat and you injure yourself, so you sue the owners. Right? Like, to me, it's like, yeah. Like, you jumped up and down on the mat. You know, you have a responsibility to know your limitations. You have a responsibility to understand your education. You have a responsibility to know, you know, how inflexible or flexible your body is. You have a responsibility for the decision you made. You could have chosen it differently, but now you're blaming someone else for the decision you made. You know? I see it all the time in relationships. He made me angry. That's you not wanting to take responsibility for the fact you're angry. That comes from something inside of you that you're denying, and instead you'd like to blame somebody else and say that they made you that way. No, they didn't. The only people you could say that to is your parents, and even then it's not strictly correct because their parents have made them that way, and so forth, if you take that to the end. And the reality is all of us have a responsibility to bring our lives into harmony with love and truth, no matter who made us what. You follow me? So there is a deep avoidance of personal responsibility. This is a big problem with regard to the use of our will. Why is God wanting us to understand our will? So that you understand that if you use your will positively, there'll be positive benefits. If you use your will negatively or avoid the exercise of your will, there'll be negative consequences. That God wants you to get to know that you're responsible for the outcome in your life. You follow me? And while sure, like somebody can decide to have a war, but at the end of the day, they can't decide to have a war without your agreement in your heart. And this is what I get at with a lot of groups, is that at the end of the day, most of you are afraid and you want somebody to rescue you. This is what drives war. Right? Because when you get afraid, you want somebody, the government, some undefined thing, to come and decide to make you safe again. This actually causes war. This emotion that you're unwilling to recognise and release. Isn't that your responsibility? Isn't it mine? If I have fear within me and I want other people, particularly the emotion that I want other people to come to my rescue, surely that particular emotion is the emotion driving the reason why I want you to come to my rescue, even if you might be violent doing it. Right? That's me not taking responsibility for the fact that this emotion is within me. We are adepts at not taking responsibility for the choices and decisions we make and putting the responsibility of those choices and decisions on somebody else. That is something we've almost perfected to an art form. It's a big problem. And you're correct, Linda, that is a big issue when it comes to using your will, because a person who truly engages their will takes personal responsibility for everything that they choose to do, everything that's happening in their life. Even if an accident occurs, they take responsibility for the fact that they were there, their will motivated them to be there, their decisions that they made and so forth motivated them to be there. Now, I'm not saying that it's not unloving to do something to help that person. I'm just saying that we often take no personal responsibility for the fact that we were there, even. Right? That we made choices, we made decisions to put us in that position. Right? And this is the thing, we need to take far more personal responsibility. And in fact, this is one of the things that God wants to teach you about your will. That your will means that almost all of your life, and of course, when I say almost, it's only the things that other people just choose to do out of harmony, love and truth that can influence your life negatively. And even if that happens, you can get yourself into a loving condition where that doesn't actually influence you negatively anymore. You can actually get into the condition where once you're at one with God, you don't even have any fear of that occurring. And when they do it, right, when they hang you on a stake or something, you're still not hurt by the action. You can get to that point. Right, but most of us don't have faith in that. But that's what I would classify as supreme taking of responsibility, isn't it? Which is what God wants us to do. Linda?
So question's lost. Is it strange, isn't it? It's about the avoiding personal responsibility. Addictions. Every addiction I have is basically an effort to avoid personal responsibility, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Every addiction you have. Because what is an addiction? You've got a soul-based emotion of hurt inside of yourself, right? So there's an emotion that feels hurt inside of yourself. That creates like a hole that you want other people to fill. So what do? Instead of releasing the emotion, you choose to not take responsibility for the fact the emotion is in you. You don't have to take responsibility for the fact that it got created, because that could have been done by you or others. All you've got to do is take responsibility for the fact that it's in you. No, it's not in somebody else, it's in you. And the only person who has control of what can be released from you is you. So what we do is we don't take responsibility for that. So now what we do is we grab a whole heap of souls of other people and we suck them dry, right? So that particular emotion doesn't have to be felt. That's what an addiction is. Right? So this is why addiction is sin. Every single emotion of hurt that you refuse to release inside of you, you will have a demand to your external environment to support, and that is not taking personal responsibility for the fact that the emotion is in you, and only you can release it. Only you can make that change through the exercise of your will. Right? So this is a big issue. Every time we're angry and frustrated with other people, we're not taking personal responsibility. Right? Every time. For our choices, our decisions, our hurt, our feelings that have created most of these things that are going on. Now, the only time that does not apply is if you're a child. Because the reality is a child is under the control of somebody else. And I'd say, I suppose there are other circumstances that I can think of, but they are extreme, and that is, let's say you were put in prison for their whole life. There's another example of maybe where your will is now under the control of somebody else for that entire period of time. But you could still release the emotion, couldn't you? You could still deal with it emotionally and work your way through it. You could. You could choose to, right? So even that's still under your control. Right, if you were put in a room for the rest of your life, what you choose to do with that is still under your control. There's famous people who have learnt that truth, like Nelson Mandela, one of those people, right, who learnt that truth in prison for most of his life. He learnt that actually his emotional responses to everything were completely under his own control, and therefore his responsibility. Right? There's people who have talked about that, like lots of people have talked about that, but the majority of us don't want to accept that, right?